Trying to hit it. Okay, we're officially live after a little bit of stopping and going and stopping. So hey everybody, welcome to the Skills Live with Casey Dimming of Georgia Bushcraft in the middle, and then on the far right, I guess for you, for everybody else, that is Phil Liebel. Liebel.
Liebel. You had it right. You had it
right. And I've heard so many people say it so many different weird ways. I wanted to incorporate them on there.
Yeah, hey, German.
So,
hey, Dustin, I can only hear Phil.
You couldn't hear me?
Turn my Wi-Fi back on.
You can hear me. That's your problem.
Yeah, Dustin's muted for me for some reason. I hear you, Phil.
Well,
I'm going to go outside.
Hear both of you.
There we go.
All right. Well, we've had some technical difficulties.
All right,
y'all. We're rolling, except for the fact that Casey's trying to.
You hear me, Dustin?
Yeah, I can hear you. You're good.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Good copy, Casey.
That's fine. Yeah, Dustin's clearly muted on my end.
That's on you, dude.
Let me see. Let me see here. All right, Phil. Well, I can't hear where Dustin's saying, but you know what? What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce you real quick. So that way we can get this ball rolling.
Let's do it.
StreamYard is the worst. I don't know what is going on with them
this
tonight.
Is my first time.
We've been having some serious technical difficulties, but it is what it is. Thanks, coronavirus. Yeah. But all right, y'all. So let's see here. So here's my introduction. You're probably not going to be able to see my screen because thank you, StreamYard. But here's our little intro for you, Phil. So largely inspired by his Native American heritage, Phil spends a lot of time in the wild with minimal gear to further his connection with nature, and believes it is important for everybody to connect with their ancestors through primitive skills. He is the owner and lead instructor at Primitive Wilderness Survival and teaches primitive portion of the Pathfinder Instructor Course. He has taught alongside and learned from many of the greatest instructors on the planet, and put his skills to the test in the Canadian Arctic for a month on Alone the Beast, yet to air. In this case, Phil will walk us through the process of making arrows from natural materials and cover fundamental skills such as straining, fire hardening, and lashing, notching, and more. So, Phil, there's our long-winded intro. Awesome. Go for it, man.
Thanks,
and Phil, actually, if I can interrupt you, Phil,
yep.
before you, I was just going to kind of do the ground rules. How this works is people are just, if they're jumping in here. So there's going to be two different ways people are watching right now. They're either on YouTube Live or on their Facebook Live. And then, of course, those videos get hosted on YouTube and Facebook after the fact. But for right now, people are able to actually go in there and comment. And so I'll be watching, Phil, for any of the comments because you probably can't see them or keep up with them. And if someone's asking a question, I'll just kind of jump in there and I'll ask it on their behalf. And I'll even be able to put it on the screen here. So that's pretty much it. So if you guys do have it, if anyone's watching right now and you do have questions during this, that's the fun part about it being more interactive, is Casey and I will probably be asking some questions, getting some clarifications. And if you guys do too, feel free to put those in the comments. So then now I'm going to go ahead and pass it to you. Oh, I did that wrong.
Awesome. All right. So what I'm seeing right now, is that how everybody else sees it?
Yes, you are. You're full screen.
Okay. Let me adjust that a little. I don't know if I moved anything. But... All right.
That looks good. Your head is going to be a little bit cut off.
Which way? There we go. Center up here. All right. So, yeah, I'm teaching Cherokee arrows. This is weird. I'm backwards, too. But we're also going to go into kind of talk about how some of these transfer, into a survival situation as well. Okay, so cool. I can see comments. Thanks, man. Cool hat. So, all right, the first step, well, real quickly, we're going to talk about all the components that we're going to need to build an arrow. So the first thing we need is going to be some type of shaft. In this case, we have river cane, and you can see this thing is crooked, which we'll get to that. And then we have some Roosevelt weed as well. So we can kind of discuss two separate ways of making arrows. The other components we're going to need are going to be some type of fletchings. In this case, we have some turkey tail feathers. We've got some deer backstrap sinew, and that's what I've got soaking in this cup here. We've got some type of heat source. In this case, I'm using a candle. I'm inside. I figured my wife probably wouldn't approve of me getting a fire going right in the middle of the living room. So we got to compromise with that. And then we've got some pine pitch glue. And pretty much a lot of these components can be, totally different classes on their own, such as this pine pitch glue, which is just a mixture of pine sap, pine resin, and charcoal or white ashes. You can mix in some rabbit poop, deer poop, beeswax, and that's what that is. And then we need some type of cutting tool. So I've got a couple of stone knives here, and then a little pocket knife. We're going to need some arrowheads, which I've got laid out here, in the case that we do haft an arrowhead. And we'll also discuss, some ways around that if we are in a survival situation and we don't have the means to haft an arrowhead on there. We can talk about how to fire harden the tip or just use a blunt arrow. And then I've got some hide glue over here in this cool little cup. I don't know where the camera's on this thing. Yeah, represent. All right, I think that covers it. So, like I said, first thing, we're going to start with our arrow shaft. This particular piece, this is so weird because I'm backwards on my iPad. This particular piece is a piece of river cane. Now, this grows pretty close to my house, so it's convenient for me. This is what the Cherokee used. It is hollow. I don't know if you can see that. And we'll talk about how that lends itself well to making an arrow in a second. But the thing with this river cane, a lot of times when you collect it, it's pretty wavy. So like one of these internodal parts will kind of curve one direction and the other will curve the other. So what you have to do is straighten this out. And that goes for, a piece of wood you collect too. It's most likely not going to be perfectly straight. So the first order of business is going to be to get this thing straight. Because if we have a wavy, wonky arrow, when we fire that thing, for one, if it's sitting on the bow like this, it's going to fly out of there crazy. But also, if it's not perfectly straight, when that rotates, that thing's not going to be very accurate. So we're going to be flying all over the place. So, like I said, the first order of business is to get this straight. So we're going to use heat for this, in this case, a candle. And what you want to do when you heat straighten these, you want to go with the internodal parts first. So I'm sure it's kind of hard for you guys to see, especially in my dark house here, but we have these nodes on river cane, which is just a small bamboo. So at each of these nodes, we're going to have these areas in between, which we're going to call the internodal parts, and then we'll have the nodes themselves. So you want to focus on the section between those first, and then we'll go back and straighten up at the nodes. You'll end up just kind of fighting yourself. If you try to straighten this and then try to straighten the node, then you have to come back and straighten the internodal part. So trust me on this, for a lot of experience, you don't want to try to do it all at once. Do the internodal first, and then we'll come back and get the nodes after it cools off. But all we're going to do is run this section between the nodes, and we're going to go separately, each one. We're just going to run that section over the fire here and heat that up. So whenever you get this nice and warm, it's going to get kind of an oily residue on the outside. It'll kind of start to shine and look a little more rubbery. And that's when you're ready to bend this thing straight. Another thing this does, I've noticed, if you grab a piece of river cane and just straighten it without heat, a lot of times when you shoot that, it's going to go back to being bent. So you're kind of not only straightening this, but you're also slightly hardening the river cane as well. It's gonna hold that straightness a little better than if you didn't do it.
Hey Phil.
Yeah.
question. So when harvesting river cane, specifically for this purpose, is there a type of river cane you're looking for? I mean, does it have to be green? Can it be sort of dead? Is it, do you want the top part versus a younger, smaller version where that's like the main base of it? Is there any tips or tricks to finding it?
Yeah, absolutely. So very good question. It depends on the situation. Like I said, like for the Cherokee, this is more of a living skill, not so much a survival skill. But for a person in a survival situation, it's going to be totally different. So if you're doing this at home, and you're not in dire need of arrows, you're not going to die, in a week or so from starvation, I would normally collect these while they're green. And I'm going to go ahead and straighten this while I'm talking through it, because we have plenty of straightening to do. But I would collect these green. I would find one probably about, 3/8 of an inch, maybe a little smaller. Collect it green, and then while it's still green, you can actually go through and straighten it a little bit, just by hand. But if you are in a survival situation, you're not going to want to use a green piece for your arrows. It's going to have a lot of flex to it, and it's going to end up just looking like a banana if you shoot that thing. So you'd probably want to try to find a dead piece that's good and dry. Try to find one that's not split. A lot of times when they're dead, they'll kind of split. But if you can find a piece that's nice and dead and dry, something that you can kind of straighten up over the fire, that'd be awesome for a survival situation.
And Phil, JC's asking, how long should the river cane be?
Yeah, so for my arrows, I like something, roughly, 30 inches. What you can do, you can just put this on your hand and kind of draw it back like you're shooting. And you want to make sure you have plenty left over on the front. You can always cut that off later, but there's no reason not to cut them long whenever you do collect them. So I normally go for about 3 foot. I'll cut 3 or 4 foot pieces, and then I'll straighten those up and then cut them to length as I go.
Awesome.
Any other questions?
Nope. So far.
Okay.
So,
Yeah,
continue. Sorry about that.
I saw you, Casey. Go ahead.
I was going to say, so I don't know if you remember last time you were here with Phil, but we have a bamboo patch that's right across the street from, where we do our event. And that's, I don't know, traditional bamboo or whatever bamboo is, different than river cane. In theory, could you use smaller bamboo?
Absolutely.
Like you are river cane? Okay. Same thing works.
A lot of people, I definitely do remember that because I was eyeballing it. But yeah, you can definitely use traditional bamboo like Tonkin cane or Japanese bamboo, and it actually works extremely well, almost better than river cane, because it'll be a little bit denser if you get a smaller piece, and that definitely works fine. So if you go somewhere like Home Depot or Lowe's or Tractor Supply and you buy their tomato stakes, normally they'll use bamboo for that.
Yeah.
And that's what a lot of people will use for their arrows. And
so it'd be the right diameter?
Yeah, it's normally pretty close. So, obviously
cool.
You'll have a few in there. Like if you buy a dozen, you'll have a couple that aren't good for arrows. But if you go at like the end of planting season, you can find them discounted pretty cheap, and you can get some good cheap arrow material that way.
That's a good idea.
I gotta find my light.
All right,
here.
start a bow drill. Start a bow drill, bro. Okay.
Yeah. So I actually started this with my Wazoo survival necklace.
Yeah.
Oh snap!
No, I used a lighter. But
no,
I
was good
have
marketing.
started these with ferro rods before. I just don't want to. This is such an amazing valued gift that I don't want to waste up the ferro rod trying to.
No, burn it.
We know where there's more.
A few of them. But yeah, so all I'm doing right now is just, like I said, heating up this internodal section. And we'll fast forward through this in a second. I just want to show the, pretty much the full process. You just repeat it. But I'll heat up one section here. I don't know if you guys can see. Gotta find the camera here.
Yeah, you can definitely see the angle.
There you go.
The angle pretty good on that.
So I'll look down it, and I'm just focusing on this one section in between these nodes here. So I can even do this if I want to. But I'll look down that, straighten it a little bit, look back down there, and I'll just keep doing that until that one section is straight. Okay, I'm just focused on that one section right now. So once I get that straight, and you can also just kind of take your fingers and hold the nodes and rotate it and look at it. But once I get that internodal section straight, and then get this one straight, I'm going to let this sit down and cool for a little while. So if I start trying to straighten these, if it's still warm in between here, I'll end up actually bending those back where they were or messing it up some other way. So I'll let those cool down, and then I'll go to just the node section, heat up those nodes, and do the same thing. So this will get pretty hot. You want to be careful. You might wear gloves or something, or just kind of bend it over your leg to keep from burning your hands. But that's pretty much the process on trying to straighten these. I don't want to spend a lot of time because I know we got to move through this fairly quickly. There's a lot to making these Cherokee arrows, but I've got one that's already pretty straight here. Not perfect, but
yeah,
we'll use it to build the rest of the arrow. But I do want to mention, once you get this straight, a lot of times what I'll do is I'll go ahead and knock one end, and I'll straighten, I don't know, probably 10 of them. I'll go outside, and I'll shoot these with no fletchings, no arrowheads, nothing. Just bare shaft. I'll shoot them at my target from about 10, 12 yards. And if these are hitting your target far left at an angle where the point is pointing to the left, that means that these are over spine for your bow. What that means is they don't flex enough for the power of your bow, whatever bow you're shooting. Now, if they end up hitting to the right, so my point hits to the right, and then the end of the arrow is pointing to the left, that means they're underspined, and they'll either fly crazy or they'll end up breaking. So you want something that when you shoot it off your bow is going to hit the target fairly straight. Okay, that's how you know you have them spined pretty close to the bow you're shooting without actually doing a spine, using a spine tester on these.
Yeah, I have a few questions here, Phil, to throw out there.
Yeah.
I might be all over the place with these.
That's
We're
all
trying
right.
to time all in. So regarding the river cane, Tom Brewer says, are there different types of river cane?
Yeah. So I don't know all the biological names of all the river cane. I know there are different strains in different areas, but pretty much it all works pretty well. I mean, especially for a survival arrow. But I've used Japanese, Tonkin cane. I've used actual river cane that grows next to my house, and it all works, just fine. So I wouldn't worry too much about trying to find, an exact type of river cane. If you can get your hands on some, get it, test it out, see how it shoots off your bow, and just make some arrows out of it. It should work fine.
Okay. And then to follow up with that, Austin's asking, he kind of talks about he's collected some, but he said it was kind of purple and green and he could crush it with his fingers. Are there different grades / species of southern eastern river cane?
So I would actually guess that was Phragmites. That's probably not river cane. A lot of people get the two confused. Phragmites are going to have really thin walls and they're going to break a lot easier. You can use those for arrows, but if you can find cane, you definitely want to go with that instead. But if I had to guess, I would say that you probably found Phragmites.
Okay. Another question regarding the shaft. If you harvest it green and straighten it, how long is the optimal drying time before use?
Good question. See, a lot of these things I overlook just running through here, so I'm glad you guys are asking questions. Typically, within 3 months, this should be dry enough. It's not like a bow skate where you have to dry it for a full year. Just dry it for several months. When it goes from being green to this kind of tannish color, you should be good. But just go out there, probably once a day while it's still green. Straighten it up a little bit by hand, and when it gets to 3 months, it should be good.
Yeah, that's the same thing Eric was saying. He says he'll hand straighten them, then bundle them together and dry for a couple months.
Yeah, Eric knows what he's doing. He's a buddy of mine. He definitely knows what he's doing. So, that works well, and you can get them almost perfectly straight without even having to use heat.
All right, I got one last question on the shafts right now,
Yep.
and that is, not that one. That's from Andrew.
Hey, Andrew.
Is there a target weight you want on the arrow?
So the actual weight of the cane shaft, I'm assuming is a question. That's what I'm going to take it as. Not really. I mean, if you're using river cane and it spines to your bow, that's plenty good enough. I've used really long pieces and they weigh a little more. And as long as they're spined to your bow, I mean, you're going to be shooting these things, you got to think within 10 or 15 yards. So we're not going to be shooting at animals from, 75 to 100 yards away. So the weight of the arrow is not going to drop, that much more. So no, not really. I've used, 300 grain or, a little over 300 grain arrows, and I've used, much heavier arrows, 500 grains. And as long, if you're within that hunting distance and they're spined to your bow, you're good to go.
If they're spined to your bow, you're good to go.
Right.
All right. Well, I think that's all the questions regarding that. The chat.
Awesome. Yeah. So like I said, once I get this thing straightened, I'll take them out, go ahead and knock them, and shoot them off my bow to make sure they are spined well. A lot of times I don't even use a spine tester. I'll just find a bunch that I think are about the right size, and that just comes from making a lot of arrows. That doesn't necessarily mean that just because they're the same thickness, they're always going to be the same spine or have the same flex. So that's why it's important to test them out. But yeah, so once we straighten these, the next step is going to be go ahead and knock these. That way we can test them. And what that means, I'm going to cut a little notch into the back of my arrow here. And I'll end up doing the same on the front to put my arrowhead in if we do go that route. And we'll kind of veer off on a different road here in a second. For river cane, this is hollow in the middle. So one thing you can do, if I can find my rock, I brought a rock in.
Where's my rock at?
There we go.
Always get a rock.
So you can get a piece of sandstone and just take this arrow, and since this is hollow, you can just grind one side on this sandstone until you grind through that wall, and then you just flip it over and grind the other side until you grind through the wall. And by grinding down each side of that, you're going to actually create a knot in your arrow. So I'm not actually going to go through that entire process. That's one way to do it. Another way would be just to take a stone knife or a knife and cut that in. But if you're doing that, for one, you're cutting towards your hand. That's probably not safe unless you can secure this somehow and not cut towards yourself. But what I normally do for my hunting arrows that are made here at home, ancient Cherokee secret.
Ancient Cherokee secret.
This isn't primitive, but I'll just take a drill and drill about an 1/8 inch hole through there, and then I'll take my knife and cut out that little section. So what that does is it creates I'll cut it a little thinner than my hole is. So that way when I go to put that on my string, it'll actually pop on and kind of hold itself a little better. So that way you don't have to worry about your arrow kind of falling off your string.
Yeah, and on that topic, Phil, Austin's asking, traditionally, how loose or tight on the string were the arrow nocks?
Traditionally, probably not as tight as we prefer them. You have to consider a few things, one of which they were using traditional stuff to make their strings out of. So, we have, some pretty good material these days, but they were having to use rawhide or pig intestine or bear intestine or yucca. And, by doing that, they had to make that string a little thicker, most likely. Now, I've made a lot of rawhide strings, and they work fine, but if they're using something like yucca, they're going to have a pretty thick string to keep that from breaking, especially if you have a pretty high poundage bow. So if you have a thicker string, you're going to have a little thicker knock as well.
Mm.
But I like for mine to fit, pretty tight. I want to be able to pop that thing on there and not have to worry about it falling off when I'm walking through the woods. But yeah, so there is a more primitive way you can do that if you want to drill the hole through, and that would be to create a little flint drill bit. This is an arrowhead, not a drill bit, but you can make something similar, half that to a stick, and you can do kind of a hand drill method and drill a hole through there. If you drill a small hole, flip it over, do the same thing, and then cut that out if you wanted to. But the best way, as far as primitive means, to cut your knock into these is the sandstone method. Just grind that down on a piece of sandstone, get through that wall, and then you'll have your knock already made. But it can be a little bit loose that way.
Do you ever try to place your nodes anywhere, like if you just to keep things from splitting out, or for strength? Are you putting your it doesn't look like it on that one, but I would think that maybe if you're concerned, you might put a node towards the knock, huh?
Yeah. So and it can go both ways. Some people put them close to the knock so it doesn't split. When you're shooting it, some people put it close to the other side, to the arrowhead. Typically, we'll get to wrapping these things and send you here in a second, and that's going to be plenty to keep that thing from splitting out. But I have done that, and a lot of times you'll see when I cut these that I do keep a node. I don't know if you can see that. I do keep a node close to the end a lot of times. But sometimes it just doesn't work out depending on the piece of shaft or the piece of cane that you're using.
Okay.
So that's how I do my knocks on the river cane. I'm going to jump over real fast into using these wood shafts. Now this is some Roosevelt weed that grows in my area. It grows, there's a lot of it in my area. So if I were in the woods in a survival situation, this is most likely what I'd be using. It grows nice and straight, and it really lends itself well to being an arrow. But with something like this, a piece of wood, a lot of times you're not going to have, it's not going to be hollow in the middle like this river cane will. So you won't be able to grind that down on a piece of sandstone and accomplish the same thing. So there is a really cool little trick to cut knocks into a piece of wood like this that I'll show you guys real fast. It's really handy, and it works well with stone tools. So hopefully you can see this good.
Yeah, not bad.
But what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my knife. I'm going to cut a little notch into this wood here. And it's just so cool that this works really well with stone tools. And this is green as well, which helps out even more. But I'll cut a little notch in each side of this shaft.
So one side has a little bit of a notch or a slit. The other side, on the opposite side, same height, I guess, is this notch too. Yeah.
So directly opposite of each other, I've got these two little notches, which is hard. Here, I'll use this white man knife so you can see better. Getting this stuff out of the way. So you can see that a little better.
Okay, yeah.
So the thing with this, the depth of these knocks, of these notches, or rather the material that's left between your notches, is going to be the thickness of your knock. So this will all make sense here in a second. And a lot of people have probably seen this before. I believe I read it in like a Morris Kochanski book. So, but the thickness between these two notches are going to be the thickness of my knock. So what I'm going to do now is come down however deep I want my knock to be. And then, rather than being in line with these, I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'll give you guys a good look at this in a second. I know it doesn't really make sense right now, but it'll all make sense in a second.
Do you know of any term that they call this breakout notch method? Knock method?
That's a pretty good title right there. Just breakout notches.
Yeah, maybe
And
so.
that might be what they call it in the book. Did you read the book, Dustin?
Which Morse Cohansky?
Bushcraft?
I'm pretty sure it's Northern Bushcraft. It might be a different book that I read it in.
I don't remember it in there, but it could definitely have been in there and just slipped my mind.
It could have been in the, one of the primitive skills books that Dave Westcott or one of those guys did. Can't really remember. I know I have the book, so it's one of the books.
Nick just got home. Nick's in the house via Facebook, looks like.
What's up, Nick?
Yo, Nick.
And it could have also been Naked in the Wilderness by John McPherson. I wish I should have done a little better research so I could have some good resources for you guys to.
What was the name of that last book?
Naked in the Wilderness by John McPherson, John and Jay McPherson. Excellent.
Oh, okay. I'll check that one out.
I keep forgetting where my camera's at. So you can see I've got a notch here,
oh, yeah.
a notch here, and then rotate it 90 degrees, same thing. So now I'm going to very gently support this with my thumb and push where I have these first two notches. And it should, sometimes it'll break on you.
Where have I seen that? Somebody did that in a TV show recently.
Really?
So I'll push, then I'll rotate that over.
There you go.
Do the same thing, and then now using these other two notches I made, I'll just break that loose. So now I've created.
Oh snap!
Snap is it? That's a knock snap.
Knock snap.
That is awesome.
So if you are in a survival situation, if you can find, a piece of roosevelt weed or something similar, maybe some horseweed, mullein. I've used mullein before, something like that, and you can use this method. You don't have to worry about trying to cut that in with stone tools. You can just make a couple little notches and pop that bad boy out. So that's a really cool little thing I want to show you guys. So that's notches. We've notched our river cane arrow, and we've notched our roosevelt weed arrow. So now we're going to do the same thing to the front of the shaft. Essentially exactly the same. I will taper this down. So I'll do the same thing, make my little notch, and then I'll just take and you can just rub it on a piece of sandstone, like I said, and taper that down to a really, really fine point. That way, whenever you go to fit your arrowhead in here, let's see which one I'm going to use. When you go to fit your arrowhead in here, you get a really nice transition. And that way, when you shoot this animal, once you puncture that hole, it's going to slide through a lot easier. If you've got a big, bulky transition right there, you're really going to slow down the penetration on your arrow, and you're not doing yourself any favors. So we've got this straightened. It's shooting good off of our bow. We've got nocks made. We've got the notch made for our arrowhead. And now we're ready to put some feathers on this thing, some fletchings. So I've got some mostly pre-made here. Hopefully you guys can see that. And
pre-made.
I'm also going to make some.
He grows his turkeys like that.
Hey Nick, Dustin, that's what my turkeys are for.
Yeah.
We're gonna harvest the feathers.
Feathers, man.
We have 2 gigantic turkeys sitting out there. So
Sounds like a bunch of fletching birds if I've ever heard of it.
Thanksgiving and Christmas. Oh,
Yeah.
They heard us.
So this particular design and the way that they made their feathers, that's what's going to make this a Cherokee arrow or a southeastern two feather fletched arrow. So let me grab my wife's cutting board here. She's going to love this.
Southeastern fletching arrow. Huh?
Southeastern two feather fletch.
Okay.
So what we're going to do, first step, you want to find, I use the tail feathers a lot just because I like the look of them. You can look, or you can use the primary wing feathers, secondary wing feathers, whatever. You can use their wing feathers, and those will work fine. I just prefer the look of these. So that's all that is. These can be a little weaker than the wing feathers, which is something you have to kind of worry about. But honestly, I don't have many of them break on me, and I'll show you how I do mine. But to kind of avoid that, but a lot of times they'll be really thin here at the end. So sometimes they can kind of break loose, from where you have them tied on. But the first thing I want to do is find two of these that have the same curvature. So I'm having a lot of trouble with this camera here. I keep wanting to think it's over here, and it's
looks good what you're doing though.
So you see how these curve to my left, I guess. So I make sure and match them so they have the same curvature. Because if not, if one's curving the opposite way, whenever I flip that around, it's not going to line up right.
Yeah, and regarding those, a couple questions. Tony's asking, do goose feathers work?
Goose feathers definitely work. A lot of people use them.
Okay. And then Southern Bushcraft says, can you use wing feathers for this method too?
Yep, absolutely.
All right.
Now, the wing feathers will be a little bit thicker. So you'll just have to shave down the vein a little bit more to get it to sit flat on your arrow to keep from cutting your hand open. Because whenever you shoot these, a lot of times, if you have a little piece sticking up on your shaft, it'll rip your hand wide open. Because we are using primitive bows, and most of mine don't have shelves cut in, so I'm shooting off knuckle. So you do want to make sure that you're careful with that. These aren't quite as thick as the wing feathers, and I can taper that down a little better to get a good smooth transition there. But once I've made sure that they both have the same curvature, I'm going to go ahead and cut all this excess off. So typically, I'll just take, one of my arrows that I have already made. I guess I could have showed you guys one of these arrows before we started, huh?
Well, that's what we're making.
So this is what we're making.
Oh, an
Dropping
arrow.
the ball on my part. This is a Cherokee arrow. But typically what I'll do is I'll take one of these arrows and I'll use that as a guideline, and I'll cut my arrow or my feather the same length as what I have on here. So I'll just kind of lay it over the top, line it up pretty close. And
If you had to estimate how long that is, what would you say?
8 inches.
Okay.
That's, including the whole thing. I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, I thought it was only 6 inches, but if you say
that's probably 6 inches. That's what we had you here for, Dustin. Mush mouth there.
All right, silly question. What about chicken feathers?
I don't know. I'm not gonna lie.
Or gaming.
I have used them.
Yeah.
I have chickens. Yeah, I mean, any feather you can make work. Any feather is gonna be better than anything. But if I'm making arrows that I want to use, and I have access to better stuff, I would probably use the better stuff. If I'm in a survival situation, I see a turkey,
use what you got.
A chicken feather laying around, I'm definitely using it. That's a.
I got you.
You guys help me keep up with my stuff here. So once I cut this to length, I'm going to go ahead and lay over the top of the other one and cut it the exact same length. Really sharpen this knife, apparently.
Blasphemy.
These veins are pretty tough. out of the way.
Hey, Dustin.
Yes, sir.
How many people we got watching tonight?
Upwards of right now 13, and then sometimes 20. So it's anywhere between 15 and 20 typically.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
I can't see anything on my end, so I was just wondering. Seems pretty engaging.
Yeah, there's a lot of people chatting it up on Facebook and YouTube.
Awesome. Well, if you guys have any questions, drop them in here and we'll get them answered. But so from here, once I cut these, I'm gonna come halfway up, and normally I'll go the way that the feather is curving. So I go to the inside curve, about halfway up, and just rip that off. I'll do the same thing on this other one. About halfway up, rip that off. And for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to go ahead and just make one of these. That way we can run through this a little quicker and get the thing finished without losing everybody. Pull out my primitive
What?
flower
Scissors. Oh my god.
I can't believe that exists
Now,
on the market.
another thing you can do is have a twig or something on fire, have a coal, an ember, and just take that and burn these into the shape you want. Okay? But again, I'm in the living room. I don't want my wife to kill me. So instead, I'm still on her cutting board and her scissors, and hopefully she doesn't watch this video.
She is watching this video.
Is she?
Yeah. She just commented she's pissed.
She said there's a ruler. She said there's a ruler right beside you, too. You know that?
Wait a second.
So I'm just going to take these scissors and trim. Actually, I'll take the bottom inch of this.
Oh, she is literally watching.
I'll take the
That's awesome.
I'll take the bottom inch of this thing and tear off that feather.
It just got real.
I'm in trouble, guys. It's your fault, Dustin.
Yeah. I didn't say to use the nicest scissors in your house.
Back away slowly.
Uh-huh.
Oh boy.
Is it really dark in here? Can you guys see that? Okay.
No, I see it.
It's visible, yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, I just trimmed that up. You know, make it somewhat pretty. And plus, if you leave all that excess on whenever you shoot these, this thing's gonna make a lot of noise. So by trimming this down nice and neat, and a lot of people trim them even smaller than this. By trimming that up nice and neat, they fly a little smoother and they don't make quite as much noise. So I hope you don't see me dumping all this feather stuff.
Oh, Lord.
Oh, she totally sees it. Oh boy.
I keep putting my knife.
But yeah, I guess primitively or with basic components, not having your really cool flower scissors. I've seen Ryan doing that too with the fire, and that seems to work really well.
Absolutely. Yeah, you can just take a twig and just run that thing down through there and then just burn off those ends. Or you can take a little ember, whatever.
Because if you don't have a knife, that's pretty hard to do.
I use the flame here, but I kind of risk the chance of burning it up more than I want to.
Yeah.
All right, so once we have this shaped the way we want it, I'm going to get it close so you guys can get a better look at this. So you see these veins, they'll kind of split off in the middle. You can see that it has that line running down the middle.
Oh,
Mhm.
So I'll actually put my knife right in the middle of that line and cut back towards this side. So I'm just going to cut halfway into this vein. I don't want to cut all the way through because then we lose all of our structural integrity there. So I'm going to put that point right in the middle of that vein, cut back, and you can kind of hear it pop. So I cut from the middle back to the side.
So if you didn't have a stone tool to work with, you probably wouldn't use like a stone knife, right? I'm guessing you might prefer like a little flake that has a real sharp.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, a flake is the best thing you can use for this part. Works better than this knife. But yeah, you just take a little flake, cut halfway, and now I'm going to take it, put my knife right in the middle where it divides down that vein, and cut it directly in half. If you want to be careful, because a lot of times you can do this and then it'll run off and you'll end up cutting off more than you want to. So if you want to be careful, you can lay that in there and just kind of make several little cuts that way that you're not getting that runoff. If you like to live on the edge, just stick it in there and go. But you do risk the chance of messing it up. So all that does is make that vein a lot thinner. You can come back and clean that up with your knife. You guys still there? Or am I flying?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, you're good.
You got really quiet. Dustin's never that quiet.
I'm really enjoying this, man. How is he doing that?
So from there, you can see where this turns from that brown to that light tan color. I'll typically use that kind of as a guideline, and I'll cut straight across, but I'm going to stop just shy of that middle vein. Flip this over.
And while we're doing that, Raul asked, do turkey feathers have straighter spines than those from the wing? I guess tail feathers. Turkey tail feathers. They straighter.
Some of them, if you get the ones right out of the middle of the tail, they'll stick straight up. But, once you get out to the sides, they're going to kind of curve up this direction. So, regardless of if you use the tail feather or the wing feather, you're still going to have a curvature. So probably not a lot of difference. It depends on if you get a primary wing feather or a secondary wing feather, because I believe it's the secondary ones. They don't have a lot of the actual feather part, whatever that word is. Hop on Google, Dustin, help me out here. But they don't have a lot of the actual feather part. They'll have the vein and just like a really small, thin section. And a lot of times those will curve a lot. So I'll use I believe it's the primary ones that are a little bit wider. But, so yeah, there's, really not much of a difference. But once I cut that in, you can see I'm left with this little tuft here. So what that is the center vein, and then whatever part of the feather I didn't cut off when I cut straight across. And I'll just take that and kind of twist it. And it gives me a little more to tie to than if I, trimmed it right to that vein, because that vein gets really small there. So I'll just kind of twist that. Give me a little more stuff to tie to there. Go ahead.
I was just going to. I was going to be your Jamie, essentially for what's his name for Joe Rogan. So here is. I'm going to bring this up for you.
Yep.
Ready?
Throw it at me.
Oh, look at that!
Nice.
That's the parts of it.
That's the vein.
There's downy barbs. There's after feather. Yeah. So there you go.
The hooklets.
Yeah. There's. All right. Back to you, Phil.
So primitive man didn't need all that stuff.
Feather part.
We got time for Wikipedia.
We just called it feather parts.
Top feather, bottom feather, middle feather.
Pretty part and the veiny part.
Feather, that part. So I'm gonna go ahead and do the same thing to my other feather.
So how do you harvest said feathers from a wild turkey?
You shoot them, or you can find them in the
Good.
woods. But typically, most of these come from turkeys that I harvest.
No, okay.
I'm wondering if
That's no fun.
a turkey buzzard feather, they seem like they're on par with turkey-sized feathers almost.
Yeah,
I heard
that would definitely work. It wouldn't be as
Buzzard.
I heard red-tailed hawks feathers are really good, and bald eagles.
So the
Oh, yeah, about that.
That's pretty sure that's illegal.
No, yeah, maybe. Okay, never mind.
Yeah, so we'll just go ahead and trim both of these. All right, any other questions regarding fletchings? Oh, actually, I have a question for myself.
Okay, no questions. So I think your question is the priority.
So let's say you are in a survival situation, and for some reason, you know, you don't just find turkey feathers laying all over the place. Typically, if you're shooting at game within 10 yards or so, especially if your arrow is spined pretty well, you know, you can get away without having fletchings at all. So all the fletching does is create some drag on the tail end of your feather, and will kind of compensate for some of the issues, you know, in your arrow spine, and it'll be a little more forgiving with feathers on. But there's actually, you know, a lot of tribes that used arrows that didn't have fletchings at all. So you can get away with with that, and especially if you use a longer arrow, and if you're shooting at something like rabbits, squirrels within 10, 12, 15 yards, I mean, if they're spined, you know, somewhat decent, you can get away with no fletchings. So, like, don't give up on the idea of making a bow and arrow. You know, if you've been in the woods for a couple weeks and you're, you know, about to die from starvation, don't think that just because you don't have fletchings, you know, this isn't going to work, because you can get away with that.
No. Yeah, it seems like it's one of the harder things to happen to come by.
Yeah. I mean, I do find a lot of turkey feathers walking through the woods close to me. But, you know, if that resource isn't there, it's just not there. So you either have to find a different way to accommodate, which you can. That's another thing. You can find, I'm sure you guys have seen Northwest Primate. He's always using stuff. Yeah.
I'm ahead of you a little bit on that, but
yeah, so something like a leaf, or if you could find something to wrap around, all you want to do is create some drag on the tail end of this arrow. Just something, you know, that way, you know, if you're flying like this, it's just going to create a little bit of drag and straighten that arrow out. So anything you can do to create drag is going to help. Even if you just tie some strings or something to the back of that. If you get some yucca and process down some yucca and make a little hula hoop looking thing or a hula skirt looking thing on the back of your arrow, anything's going to work. But traditional Cherokee arrows, this is how they fletch. Okay, so we've got our arrow straightened. It's spine tested. We've got our notches made. We've got our feathers made. At this point, we are ready to tie these things on. So I've got some sinew that's been soaking here. Give a shout out once I can find where the camera's at.
That's a cool cup.
It's hard to see it.
Who is that?
My buddy Rick Spicer. You can't even see the logo. Up in Arkansas, he puts on the Brewhaw Bushwhack, and that's where I get this cup.
Oh, cool. I've heard about that.
Check it out. Check out the Pack Rat Outdoor Center. Hopefully he's watching. If not, somebody
he made a little cameo in the main picture we were using. He's the guy in the background in Phil's
yeah, he is.
bow shooting picture.
Nice. I forgot about that.
Cool.
So what I did.
That's some real sinew?
Yeah, this is the
okay.
sinew. And all I did is I scraped all the meat off this, set it in my windowsill, let it dry. And you just want to split this down into small strands. And you can either chew on this and do it that way, or you can soak it in some water. So I've had this soaking in water for however long the video is running. So it's nice and hydrated. And then over here in this awesome cup, I've got some hide glue in here. You don't have to use hide glue. You can use some Type Bond, wood glue, you know, whatever. I've got some hide glue in here. I'm just going to dip my finger in there.
Cool.
Add a little bit of that to that sinew. Now, the sinew is going to bind to itself without glue because it's going to kind of shrink wrap, and sinew itself actually has the proteins and stuff that you use to make hide glue. So without even, you know, using glue, it's going to bind to itself automatically. But I like just a little bit of security. So I'm going to come about a ½ inch away from the end of my arrow and kind of wrap that on itself a couple of times.
Hey, Dustin.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to do a 4-minute warning? Are we trying to keep these at 60 minutes for YouTube or IGTV or?
You know, I haven't uploaded any on IGTV yet. That was the goal, though. I don't know if we're gonna make it in the 4 minutes. What do you think?
Oh, okay. Well, I know that.
We if you'll remember too, though, we kind of fumbled around for like 2-3 minutes at the very beginning too. Yeah, well, we can cut that out, edit a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. No, we're good. I didn't know in the previous videos we did like a 4 or 5 minute warning.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure if you were going to or not.
5-minute warning if you can. If not, dude, just roll with it. It'd rather be get through.
I'm enjoying this. Phil, you can
So
do this all night. I don't even care. This is awesome.
Once we've tied that string on there, that sinew, I'm going to take this little piece where I kind of twisted it up there. I'm going to stick that on there and wrap over one time just to hold that in place. All right, now I've freed up one hand. And I'll talk about something else here in a second. Let's get this tied on. I'm going to take this other one, lay it on there, directly opposite. Do the same thing. Tie that on there. Okay, so if you'll notice, when I tied these on, I tied them vertically in line with my knock. So that way when I shoot this thing, these feathers aren't hitting my hand or the side of the bow. Well, they'll hit my hand, but they won't hit the side of the bow. And hopefully they'll fly a little bit better than if I had done them the other way, so that the feather is hitting the bow and kind of kicking it off a little further. This way they're vertical in line with the bow. When I shoot off the bow, they're flying straight.
Yeah.
So once I get that wrapped on there, now look, my hands are free. This is a really nice thing about Cherokee arrows. If you use 3 feathers, you really feel like you need, you know, like 3 or 4 hands just to hold those things in place and get them tied on, especially if you're doing it completely primitively. But with these, just using 2 feathers and using this method, it's a lot easier. So what I'm doing is I'm just wrapping all the way down right next to the strand or the wrap before. So I'm just wrapping my way towards these feathers here. So that sinew is about out. Get to the end, I'm going to make sure it binds to itself pretty well. I might even take a little more glue and just rub that over the top. So you'll see I left quite a bit of area here I had to wrap. That's just going to reinforce that much more and keep it from splitting out like you were talking about earlier, Dustin.
Mm-hmm.
So I'll take another piece of sinew. I'm just going to dip that down in the glue itself. Maybe. The sinew likes to stick to everything. Get some glue on there. And now I'm just going to tie this back over where I left off. While I'm doing this, I want to make sure as I get closer to the base of this feather that I keep these somewhat straight. So I don't want them to get really twisted. All right. Continue wrapping all the way down. And normally, just by twisting this, it'll kind of straighten itself out. Just kind of falling back and forth. If that makes sense. Alright, so now we are at the base of the feather. I'm gonna wrap that pretty well. A little more glue. Finish that off. Get my primitive paper towel here. Alright, so we've got the back tied on there. Now at this point, I've tied the back, like I said, vertically in line with that knot. When I get ready to tie this, the front, or the side closer to the front of the arrow, I'm actually going to rotate that. So if I've got it tied in line on the side here, I'm going to rotate that down on the bottom side so that the part that I cut off lays flat on the arrow. Okay, so we're doing like a 90 degree, let me think. Yeah, a 90 degree turn there. So the back part is glued to the side in line with the knot. The bottom part is going to rotate down and be glued on the bottom to make sure we keep those in line. This camera is killing me. Look, it looks like
It looks
like
pretty
a Star
good.
Wars fighter jet thing,
Not too.
doesn't it?
I really love these series. Darren Cook. Yeah. Miss you, buddy.
So again, I'm going to take another piece of sinew, some more hide glue, and like I said, most of these components you could do an entire secondary video on, such as hide glue and pine pitch glue. But hide glue is just a natural glue made using pieces of an animal's hide and our sinew. So you heat it up, simmer it, and by doing that, you break down the proteins. Again, I'm not a scientist, so correct me if I'm wrong, but you break down those proteins and you're basically creating a natural jello. That's what jello is. So you're going to simmer that down, pour that liquid off of your rawhide. I'm doing the same thing here as I did at the front. Like I said, I lined those up 90 degrees so the arrow or the feather rotates a little bit, and I'm just wrapping this thing all the way down to the base. But you heat up that rawhide and sinew pieces with some water, simmer that for a little while, and then you pour off that water and let it sit, and it's going to basically turn into jello. So from the jello form, you can either dry that out and let it dry and cut it up and keep it as a powder or little pellet looking things, or you can heat up that jello. Once you heat up the jello form, it's going to turn back into liquid, at which point you can use it like I'm using this. Okay, so I got these in line. I wrapped all the way down to the base. Take a little more glue. Just to tie it all together. No, there's no knots at all on this. Now, that's going to lead me into the secondary survival situation talk. So I'm glad you asked that question, Tony. So if I were doing this, let's say with this piece of Roosevelt weed, I might find feathers, but I'm most likely not going to find some deer sinew. If I have, I've gotten pretty lucky. Okay, so instead of deer sinew, we're going to have to use something like yucca. We're going to have to use some kind of inner tree bark, in which case you would have to tie that off. With the sinew, it binds to itself with that natural glue, especially if you add some hide glue. But if you're using, plant fibers, you're going to have to tie that off. So what I would normally do is I would wrap it. So I'll create a little loop. I'll leave the tail end sticking way out the end here, and then I'll wrap all the way back, and then wrap back towards that loop, pass my end through that loop, and then pull it down. So I know we are on a little bit of a schedule, so I don't want to get too deep into that, but that's what you do, or you could just tie it off, but it's probably not going to work as well. So I would do the frapping. So that is the Cherokee fletchings, okay, and that is what makes this a Cherokee arrow. Are these 2 feathered fletchings? They fly
That is awesome.
just as well. They work really well. Now, from this point, I could sharpen this to a point. I could heat this up over a fire. Now, it is hollow in the middle, so it's not going to work as well with the river cane, but something like this rosebud weed, I could heat that up over the fire, char that, grind it down on a piece of sandstone, and I'm basically fire hardening the tip of this. So just heat it up. You don't want to burn it, because if you burn it, you're going to burn your point off. So you want to heat. You might burn the outside, but you're going to kind of char that, grind all that charred material off, and get that down to a nice sharp point, and it's going to be harder than it was if it's just wood, because you're basically fire hardening it, and you're also drying that out if it's a little bit wet. So from there, you could use that to hunt small game. And honestly, if you get a heart and lung shot on a deer with a filled point or with just a sharpened point, if you pass through their heart and lungs, they're done. So that would be good enough. But the nice thing about these arrowheads is they get in there, they do a lot of damage, they cut everything up. You get a lot of hemorrhaging, you get a lot of better blood trail, easier to find, and they're just super deadly. So do we have time to tie the arrowhead on, guys? We're good?
We can give it a shot.
Do it.
Go for it, man.
Okay,
Yeah.
awesome. I hate to not finish this thing out right. I know we're
Oh, you're good, man. Finish it up, bro.
So I've got some pine pitch glue here. Like I said,
cool.
This is just some pine resin that's mixed with charcoal. You can also use the white ashes, and you just grind that charcoal down, mix that with the melted pine resin. If you can find it on the tree while it's still kind of soft and bushy, that's better, as long as you don't heat it up too much, because what you do is you're going to burn all the turpentine out of that, and you're going to make it a little more brittle. So if you can keep that turpentine in there and not burn it all off, you're going to have a little bit more flexible pine pitch. But I'm going to heat this up. This pine pitch, it's essentially just a natural, primitive hot melt glue. So you heat that up over your fire. Now there's a lot of stuff that has gone into this beforehand to get me to the point where I'm at now. So keep that in mind. Like I said, several of these things can be different videos on their own, like making arrowheads, which I believe Justin Cook did a video on, and he's an exceptional napper. So check out that video. And then, of course, the pine pitch glue, the hide glue, the harvesting and processing deer sinew.
Hey, Dustin, those sounds like good follow-up videos.
100%.
Yeah, so that's the thing with primitive skills. Once you kind of go down that rabbit hole, once you learn one skill, you kind of get sucked into it. You can't do just one thing, and then you can't make your own arrows and buy everything online. What's the point? So then you have to learn how to do each component of making that arrow. So I'm trying to get too off topic here. What I'm doing is heating this up and melting it, and then kind of sticking that in my little notch there. So I'm going to find an arrowhead that I want to use. This is a little tiny guy. I'm so used to the camera being over here. Little tiny guy. Point size, awesome, man. So I like to use small arrowheads. These little guys, but what everybody calls bird points, they weren't used for birds. They were used for deer, large game. But as you can see, that's a little tiny guy. I don't know, it probably weighs 50, 60 grains, I'm guessing. A lot of people use a little larger. And that's not a bad size point either. But these little tiny guys, you're going to get better penetration. They're going to go up in there. They'll slide between ribs a little easier. Your arrow is going to penetrate a little deeper, and they're going to do just as much damage if you get a good shot. That's the thing. You want to get close, and you want to get a good shot. If you are going out and just taking wild shots, if you haven't spent the time at home and thinking that a larger point is going to get it done, take the time, build the skills, and make good shots. The other thing a lot of people talk about is putting that large point on the front, which you might be referring to. Putting a large point on the front to get that front of center weight. And that's something I didn't discuss. Typically, when I get my arrows or my shafts, I'll kind of weigh them on my finger, and I want the heavier end to be my front. Okay, so you want that weight front of center, if you can. It's not terribly important at close range, but you typically want more weight the front of center. And a lot of times people will think that adding a larger arrowhead on will make it fly a little better, and it might, but if your arrow is spined correctly, it's not necessary. Another thing is a heavier point might, if you have an overspined arrow, putting a heavier point on will make it fly a little better, and that is true, but you should have arrows that are spined correctly or close to correctly to your bow to begin with.
That's interesting. Austin has some illegal.
Oh, yeah. Good point.
Thought on that. Good point.
3/4 inch. That's big. So Texas, for a long time, I believe it was 7/8. No, it was 7/8. It was 7/8 of an inch wide to legally hunt deer with, and they just refer to it as broadheads. I assume it encompassed broadheads or stone points. But it had to be 7/8 of an inch. And luckily, last year or the year before, they dropped that law. So now in Texas, you can use a really small point. There's no small, there's no minimum legal size. If you do live in a state where they regulate that, then just make it as small as you can legally, would be my advice. And normally, you should be able to hunt hogs. Of course, I don't know other state laws, but most places, you can hunt hogs with whatever size point you want. At least in Texas, that was the case before they dropped the regulations on deer as well. So I want to heat this up. This is flammable, so you can catch this on fire. I want to heat it up back to its melting point. Slide that arrowhead in there. Heat it up again. And at this point, I'm just making it a little prettier and making sure I get a really smooth transition. So I'll heat that up and push down any of that excess. Make sure I get it in there straight as well. I apologize for this lighting, guys. It's not very good.
We can actually see pretty good.
Yeah, you're good, man.
Maybe it's just on my end. But the cool thing about this is you can heat this up and move it around as much as you want. So if you're not happy with how that point's in there, just heat it up and fix it. I'm going to knock a little bit of this glue out of my notches on the point here. So Dustin and Nick actually took this class with me in Georgia, and Casey was there as well. So that's cool. It's like we're all reunited via the interwebs.
Let's see if I can.
Heck yeah! When are we doing it again?
Yeah, you still got it.
Yeah, I gotta repair it though. I gotta repair it, put my stone back on there, and secure the fletching a little better.
Nice.
I like your shirt, Dustin, by the way.
I like your shirt, by the way.
Hey, nobody commented on my shirt.
I-
See it?
I can't read your
I was
shirt.
gonna wear a Wazoo shirt, but I wore my Wazoo necklace.
Yeah, you're good.
So I figured.
Where's your
you
Georgia
guys-
Bushcraft shirt? God.
It's in the closet.
Oh, okay, good.
I
At
can only
least
wear
it's
one
somewhere.
shirt. I'm sorry, guys.
Casey and I flip flopping. I'm wearing the
Have
Georgia
shirts.
Bushcraft.
Wear my shirt. Have a shirt over here, one over here.
Sure.
Gotta represent, man. I got my sweet new Wazoo hat.
Oh yeah.
All right, keep your class going. I'm interrupting.
I don't know if you guys can.
Is that a Wazoo hat you got on there, or is that a?
This one?
Yeah, talk about that R&D, that new.
The new swag.
Here's the.
Oh snap! Look at
This is where I
that.
normally rock. That Coyote tan. Awesome.
Thanks,
I like that, man.
appreciate y'all.
So I'll get another piece of sinew here. I'm gonna start probably, I don't know, not quite a ½ inch back away from my point. And what I'm doing by doing that is reinforcing this notch. So if I do miss, which I never do, if I do miss, it's not going to split my shaft. Even if I break the arrowhead, hopefully it won't split that shaft, and I can tie a new arrowhead on. I'm going to wrap up to about the base of that arrowhead on the right side here, and I'm going to. This is a corner notch, so I'm going to bring that up, go into one notch, wrap around to the other notch, and then come back at an angle. I know that's hard to see. And then I'll do the same thing on the other side. So when I get here, this is hard. I gotta do it away from myself. So I'll go diagonally through that notch. Then I'll go straight across to my other notch. And then I'm going to go diagonally back down. And I'm just going to keep doing that back and forth, tying that arrowhead to the shaft as best I can. And once I start, getting close to the tail end of my sinew there, I've got 3 or 4 inches left. Get a little more glue on my finger. And now I'm going to come back down and just finish that off on the shaft. So I'll wrap that back down at the base of that arrowhead and glue that down.
Awesome.
So this is a little coral point. I got this coral from Ryan Gill at Hunt Primitive. And if you guys don't want to make your own arrows, if you don't have the time or the means or the materials, he does an exceptional job of making arrows and selling them. I don't really make and sell them too much because it's enough of a pain just to make my own. So
I'll drop a link right now in huntprimitive.com.
Okay. Yeah, he sells arrows, bows. He sells pre-made points. He sells the rock, all that stuff. So anything you want as far as primitive archery goes, he sells it. I don't. I teach.
He also has books. I think he's written a few books on the matter.
Do what?
I think he's also got a few books that he's written on the matters.
Oh yeah, he's got some really good books out. Yep. Hunt Primitive, Ryan Gill. But that's essentially it for a
That is
Cherokee
awesome,
arrow.
man.
We made an arrow.
Woo!
And then, so now we got all kinds of classes. We have to make all the pieces, and we need to make a bow. Can't throw
You gotta
that.
make a bow.
Yeah. Yep. And we'll do that next.
Cool.
Guys, hang tight. No. Keep my wife off here, and I'll set this camera back a little bit. We'll set up a target here in the house, and we'll see how this thing flies, huh?
Do it.
Oh, I better not. I don't want to get.
She won't care at all, I promise.
As long as you never miss, like you said.
Well,
Just kidding. I have a wife. Don't do that.
any
I know the
other
repercussions.
questions? Excellent instruction. Thanks, man. I appreciate it. Sorry if we got a little off topic.
Darren, you're the bomb.
Yeah,
What?
he's pumped about me getting a divorce, apparently.
Oh man, I love Darren.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. If anybody's got any
That's
other
awesome, man.
questions, any other questions, drop them real fast before we get off here. I want to make sure we covered everything.
Well, Phil, when the
Thanks,
craziness ends, hopefully one day, I'd love to have you come back down here, man, and for one of our events or gatherings, or just a specific class alone. Maybe you and Justin can do a like a primitive bow class or something. I don't know, something, man.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely miss Georgia. I've had a lot of fun there.
Well, we miss having you out here, man.
It's
been
always
too
fun
long.
hanging out with you guys. But yeah, once all this stuff blows over, we'll definitely have to make it happen.
Absolutely, man.
Doesn't look like there's any other questions. Everyone's just saying salutations and thank you very much. They said it was a great class.
Awesome. I appreciate it, guys. Hopefully I covered everything. We got our shafts. Talked about, getting your hands on those, straightening them, testing them, doing your notches, tying on your feathers, your fletchings, and your points. And you have your finished product, which is the Cherokee arrow.
Awesome, man. That looks great. You did a really good job.
Thanks. I appreciate it. Hopefully it flies good.
So now the next part of this class is we're going to go harvest turkey feathers.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Harvest those and send them to Texas.
We're wrapping it up. Thank you so much, Phil. We appreciate you, man.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, buddy. It's good to see you, man. Stay safe.
Yeah, it's good to see you all.
Live. Appreciate y'all jumping in on here and asking questions, getting involved, and supplying some also suggestions and your own perspectives too. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, no, it definitely, I've learned more as a teacher by listening to questions from the students. So I always appreciate any kind of questions you guys can ask. A lot of times I'll skip over stuff and forget certain parts. So I definitely appreciate the feedback and the questions. Look at that turkey.
Well, thank you. We're going to go ahead. I'm going to end the turkey video. Y'all have a great day, and we'll be doing another one of these next Wednesday, hopefully. Don't know who it's going to be yet.
See you guys.
All right, bye.
Mystery. All right, y'all.